Un-BundleGate, UK streaming goes flat, and your cocktails at work. Welcome to the Unlimited Supply Podcast, your daily music business TLDR in your ear, powered by a tornado of queeners and rods, and brought to you by No Disc, helping music, technology, and finance companies navigate the music industry in partnership with Digital Music News. It's January 9th, 2026. I'm Lars Murray. It's Finance Friday, but before we dive into the shallow money trench, at the end of the year, the social feeds of folks of a certain age, that would be my age, were awash in lamentations of the death of MTV. The whole thing was prompted by MTV announcing that it was shutting down secondary music channels in lots of markets. I don't even know how long it's been since MTV has been a music channel. It's long since ceased to exist as it did, and as a concept, it's difficult to explain to anybody under the age of 40 how big it was at one time. This moment proved a focal point for everyone else to mourn its gradual death, though, and it seems to have provided a prompt for a new website called MTV Rewind, which is essentially a YouTube wrapper programmed to simulate MTV through various filters, including decades it didn't even exist in, like the 1970s, decades it did exist in the 80s and 90s and early aughts, and through the filters of various shows, including 120 Minutes, that was my favorite, and others. There's a link to MTV Rewind in the show notes. As of this recording, it's still up and running, as if Paramount doesn't have anything else to do right now in acquiring or trying to acquire Warner Brothers Discovery. I'm sure that Paramount is going to try and shut down this clone MTV, even in the absence of any commitment to the actual MTV. This is why we can't have nice things. This is a nice thing, though, while it lasts. Universal Music Group's Lucian Grange, fresh off the announcement of WMG's deal with NVIDIA the other day, issued his annual memo to employees. I can sum it up for you in 3, maybe 4 or 5 phrases. Lots of hits, AI, streaming 2.0, superfan, market share dominance, something. Over at Billboard, Dan Reese somehow found some news in there. There's a link to that article, which includes the full text of the memo, in the show notes. Meanwhile, over at Music Business Worldwide, Daniel Tenser reported that Hybe America has named old friend Ethiopia Habtemarian as its president of music. It's not a particularly surprising turn of the executive merry-go-round, as it reunites Ethiopia with P and Coach K of Quality Control, which now sits under the Hybe America umbrella, and with whom she worked very closely over at Motown. In another spin of the executive turntable, Warner's top publicist James Steven got called up to the Yankees, so to speak. He's heading over to UMG. According to Music Business Worldwide, James will now fade into the background according to the publicist's code. Congrats, James. You're always free to feed us info, to feed us lunch, and to tell us what we're missing out on. Now let's dive into the shallow money trench where thieves and pimps run free. The Copyright Royalty Board, or CRB, which sets the rates for publishing payouts in the United States, has launched its latest rate-setting proceedings, Phono Records 5, or Phono Records V. That naming convention never fails to crack me up. It sounds like Interpol, or the Politburo, or Comintern. Anyway, Phono Records 5 will set the rates for songwriters and publishers between 2028 and 2032. Phono Records 4 was the agreement that set the stage for BundleGate, in which Spotify manipulated the terms of the agreement to reduce its royalty obligations, or, depending on your point of view, screw artists and songwriters. Phono Records 5 is an opportunity for the CRB to put that right. Let the lobbying begin, and we'll see if it turns into Un-BundleGate. Earlier this week, we talked about UK streaming subscription revenues being pretty flat in 2025. As a footnote to that, over in Music Business Worldwide, Murray Stassen provided some crucial context. Flattening growth in subscription streaming exactly matched the UK inflation rate in 2025. Wow. What that means is that UK subscription revenue didn't grow at all. In one short year, we've gone from flattening to flat. Let's hope the UK is an outlier. Y'all remember back in 2018 when I went around to every label and every management company that I could stuff into a year and said, hey guys, Spotify's going to launch podcasting and they're going to use it to reduce payments to the music industry? Maybe it would be a good time to get into the podcast business because you kind of want to know where your biggest customer is taking things. Remember that? I didn't think so. Well, let's flash forward 7 or maybe 8 years. On Wednesday, Spotify announced that it was lowering the threshold for payouts on video podcasts to just 1,000 engaged listeners over a 30-day period. Does that 1,000 sound familiar? Well, if it does, that's because that's where Spotify draws the line at paying artists for music. Now, granted, that 1,000 streams for artists is over a year rather than a month, but at the same time, let's note that the podcast number has moved down while the music number has moved up. Of course, musicians with 1,000 streams over 12 months aren't making, dick, and there's a reasonable argument to be made that the threshold for musicians should be even higher because all of that human bulk music just dilutes the pool for the real career musicians. That's an entirely different debate. The hobby horse I've been riding for years is that Spotify will do anything it can to pay the music industry less, and the podcast move here is just the latest example of that. Murray Stassen had the story over at Music Business Worldwide. To end Finance Friday on a slightly more optimistic note, this week MusiCares, on the first anniversary of the tragic LA fires, reported that it had paid out $15 million plus in aid to fire victims over the past year, which is pretty cool. That's why it costs $3,000 to get into the room at the Person of the Year Gala. It's refreshing to know that your cocktail dollars are at work and that $3,000 is buying more than just a few past hors d'oeuvres, a warm gin and tonic, and every few years, a night full of good music. The better news is that MusiCare said there's still more where that came from. Ashley King had the story over at Digital Music News. And that's about it for Finance Friday. Support for Unlimited Supply is provided by Hangout.fm. Hangout by Turntable Labs, Inc. is the new social listening platform where users connect, discover new music, and play over 100 million songs with their friends and family. And Hangout just added a generative AI feature that allows DJs to create and spin music on the fly. Our Unlimited Supply Song of the Week? Well, there's no such thing as a guilty pleasure anymore, so I'm going to lean right into that. I'm a sucker for hyperpop, so when the biggest release of the week is a hyperpop song by a manufactured K-pop band, that would be Cat's Eye, it's pretty hard to resist making that song, that instant earworm hyperpop gem, the song of the week. It's called Internet Girl. It's by Cat's Eye. You can check it out in the Unlimited Supply playlist on Spotify and Amazon Music and turn it up loud. I can't include the actual song in the podcast unless someone gives me a waiver. And hey, promo guys, any waiver will count as a favor. You can listen to it in the show notes. If you like what you hear, please hit that follow button wherever you get your pods. I live for your praise and encouragement in person, but it helps a lot more if you drop us a rating and or a review on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or Spotify, and tell a friend or three, preferably 21 times, because according to marketing wizard Susie Schultz, it now takes not 5, but 21 times for anything to sink in. Links are in the show notes as always, but you can also visit unlimitedsupplypod.com to sign up for our newsletter, to tell us what you think about the show, to suggest feature ideas, to feed us info, to feed us lunch, to call us out on our dubious assertions, and to tell us what we're missing out on. In the words of the great philosopher Eduardo Rivadavia, don't let your short-term greed get in the way of your long-term greed. And remember, in this business, no conflict means no interest.